Support for this episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere is made possible by the Wessex Press, the premier publisher of books about Sherlock Holmes and his world. Find them online at wessexpress.com, and the Baker Street Journal, the leading publication of Sherlockian scholarship since 1946. Subscribe today at bakerstreetjournal.com.
I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, episode 145, From Gillette to Brett.
I hear of Sherlock everywhere since you became a chronicler.
In a world where it's always 1895, comes I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, a podcast for devotees of Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the world's first unofficial consulting detective.
I've heard of you before. You're Holmes the meddler, Holmes the busybody, Holmes the Scotland Yard Jack in office.
The game's afoot as we discuss goings-on in the world of Sherlock Holmes enthusiasts, the Baker Street irregulars, and popular culture related to the great detective.
As we go to press, sensational developments have been reported.
So join your hosts, Scott Monty and Burt Wolder, as they talk about what's new in the world of Sherlock Holmes.
You couldn't have come at a better time!
And welcome once again to I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast for Sherlock Holmes devotees where it's always 1895. I'm Scott Monty.
And I'm Burt Wolder.
And I'm no longer 18. Nor am I 95, for that matter.
Well, but you're somewhere in the middle of that, and that's just about right.
I won't say exactly where, whether it's mean, median, or average, but it is somewhere in that range. So for those of you math scholars following along at home, you'll know what we mean.
Yes. You're a cosine in the Sherlockian world.
Oh, the cosine of 4.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, we are really going off on a tangent. I'm sorry. That's just, wow.
Oh, that's very hypotenusy of you.
Yes. Wow. Well, enough of that. Let's get down to business here. We have a great guest, with us that has, some news to share, which we want to share with you. Before we get into that, just some quick housekeeping. If you would like the show notes to this episode, you can find them at ihose.co/ihose145. That's all lowercase, ihose.co/ihose145. You can head on over to ihearofsherlock.com, where we've got all sorts of information about how to subscribe to the show, blog posts in between our episodes that you might want to get caught up on. You can subscribe via email there. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or whatever podcast player you choose. And, of course, that is also the place where you can make your generosity known to us. We've had a few folks join the ranks of benefactors of note lately, and we thank you for that. You can support us on PayPal or Patreon, either as a one-time or as a recurring donation, and we thank you for that. So get over there and get to work.
Yes, and leave us a review, please, right now. Just sort of press that pause button and get on over to iTunes. And enter a review using as many 3 or 4 syllable words meaning fabulous and fantastic as you can possibly recall. That would be a big help to us.
Well, it doesn't take 3 or 4 syllables to say these words. Our friends at Wessex Press would like to have a word with you.
Here in the ancient Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Wessex, we are still getting over the untimely death of Eloise, beloved of Abelard, in 1163. We've raised our spirits by playing Kiss in the Ring and Thread My Needle. But you don't need cheering up, because you have your copy of a curious collection of dates through the year with Sherlock Holmes by Leah Gwynn and Jamie Mahoney. It highlights every day with significant events from the Sherlockian universe. Available right now from our WessexPress.com. That Eden where the immortal brave dwell in a land serene, whose towers beyond the shining wave at sunset oft are seen. Find your own garden of delight with the pleasures only a new book from the Wessex Press can provide. Choose yours today.
Early summer, it's always a great time to be coming out of Wessex, or going into Wessex for that matter.
Yeah, or going around Wessex, or driving through Wessex, or stopping in the friendly local tavern in the market square to quaff a tankard of ale.
Oh, I could do that anywhere. Well.
Oh, but it's better in the ancient ancestral kingdom of Wessex than any place else. Mostly because based on the purity laws, the vast majority of the ale they sell there is dysentery free.
Well, it's funny because back in the medieval times, and even further back, it was very common to have wine or beer in favor of water, and not because of its effects, but simply because, as you say, you could count on it being disease-free. The alcohol would kill whatever bacteria might be around.
That's right. Yeah, water would kill you.
Yeah, crazy. I was at an event today, a family and friends barbecue, and someone brought along a bottle of mead. Have you ever had mead?
Yes. Honey-flavored alcoholic beverage. It's amazing what's come back over the last few years. The hard ciders, the cider varieties, potions like mead, some of these ancient ancestral things. And in fact, I can't remember which brewer it is. There's a relatively, sort of a mid-sized brewer. I don't think it's Dogfish, but it's one of them, who a couple of years ago brought back some ancient Egyptian recipe for beer.
Wow.
It's just amazing, the creativity that people get up to. How was the mead?
The mead was excellent. It was obviously honey-based with an orange spice flavor to it. It was very good. And, of course, in order to make mead, one needs honey. And it turns out that this gentleman was, in fact, a beekeeper. So, hence the connection to Sherlock Holmes, once again. You wonder if Sherlock Holmes was making mead with some of the fruits of his labor in beekeeping down on the Sussex coast.
Now, there's a great idea. We were up at the Speckled Band of Boston, and the souvenir, there's usually a dinner. There's usually a souvenir at the dinner of the Speckled Band of Boston. Some years it's been Sherlockian coasters, a variety of things. This year, the souvenir, thanks to the poker of the Speckled Band, George Schwartz, the souvenir was a bottle of bitter that he had brewed along with a friend of his. But wouldn't it be great to have a Sherlockian mead? What a great idea.
That'd
from
be
the
perfect.
Sussex Downs.
Yeah. Well, I hope someone will get to work on that.
I want somebody to get to work on that so we can get to work on something.
Yes. Oh, I would down that at Sussex Downs or anywhere, really. Well, in the meantime, let's join our guest. Well, we are pleased to have Stephen Doyle back on the show. Of course, Stephen Doyle, BSI, Western Morning News is his BSI investiture. You may know him as the publisher of the Baker Street Journal, one of our sponsors here. And he is also the proprietor of Wessex Press, one of our other sponsors. My goodness, it's like not a trifecta, like a duofecta. Steve is also the author/editor of Sherlock Holmes for Dummies. I guess I should fairly say co-editor of Sherlock Holmes for Dummies, and has been with us twice before on the program, all the way back on episode 2, when we talked to him and Mark Gagan about Wessex Press, and also on episode 25, when we talked with him about the aforementioned Sherlock Holmes for Dummies. Steve is coming to us live from Indiana, and we are pleased to be talking with him once again here on I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere. Steve, welcome. Welcome back.
Well, it's nice to be back. Hello, gentlemen.
Well,
coming to you from just north of Indianapolis.
Excellent. And what's the Sherlockian temperature right now in Indianapolis? How are things there?
Well, as far as Sherlock Holmes goes, things are very active. Of course, the actual temperature here seems to be like 100 degrees today, but the Sherlockian temperature is hot too. We have very active local Scion Society, the Illustrious Clients of Indianapolis. And, of course, we have this event that's coming down the road here in a few months. And there's a lot going on.
Excellent. Well, you may have heard we talked with one of your local counterparts, Vincent Wright, on the last episode. So we seem to be
that was great.
Yeah. We're right here in the heartland, the Sherlockian and U.S. heartland as well.
Right. We like to call it the axis which the Sherlockian world turns on, but that's of course our local view. I'm sure there's many people think the same thing.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That is definitely a good thing. Well, we want to talk to you about From Gillette to Brett 5.
Yeah.
How did we get here?
Right.
5 already.
I don't know how we got here, to be honest with you.
I guess we did 1 through 4 already, but when did you start? When was the first From Gillette to Brett, and how did it come about?
Well, the first one was all the way back in 2003, which, although I remember it well, was, it's a long time now. It's, 15 years ago, something like that. Nice. And it was held in Indianapolis.
Whose brainchild was it?
Well, it was mine. I shared it with, of course, Wessex Press is the organizing agency of Gillette to Brett, and I'm only one half of Wessex Press. Mark Gagan is the other half, and as often happens, I will get an idea, and I'll go to Mark and say, "Hey, I've got this idea. What do you think?" And sometimes he says, "That's crazy," and that's the end of that. And sometimes he says, "That's crazy," and we do it anyway. So that's kind of the story of what happened with Gillette to Brett. We it didn't come out of nowhere. We'd actually had done conferences prior to Gillette to Brett. We're getting way back into over the horizon of living memory practically, but we had done under the auspices. Actually, I had done them. This is pre-Wessex Press. I had done conferences under our old publication, the Sherlock Holmes Review. We'd done 5 of those, and the first one of those was back in '87, that magical year of 1987. And so I had sort of learned how to do it. Taught, I learned a few things along the way, but of course these are on a scale that are, a higher scale than the review conferences had been. So
what was the original idea, even back in '87? And was it more complicated than Sherlock Holmes in film, or was there a spark?
Yeah, the ones in the Sherlock Holmes review conferences that predated Gillette to Brett were general. They were just sort of general Sherlockian conferences, and they weren't devoted to film or television. Of course, that's a particular interest of mine. So there was always sort of a component to it. And so the very first Sherlock Holmes review conference was, as I said, in '87, and it was in that sort of white hot fervor of the Granada television series that had debuted a couple of years earlier. So, and it was still going strong. And being a huge fan that I was of that show, I started this little quarterly publication and immediately wanted to start seeding content about that show into the publication because I knew it'd be good for the publication, and I was just a fan, right? So I wanted to. It just seemed like a natural thing to do, and we had and actually this is a key element, even right up through today. The first thing I did was when I the review started started working on it toward the end of 86. It came out in 87. By the end of 87, we'd had 3 issues, or toward the end of 87, we had three issues, and we'd already cooked up a conference. And I knew that the conference would promote the publication, and the publication would give us credibility to put on a conference. Does that make sense? It was this sort of, it was a lot of, gotta be honest with you, it was a lot of bluff on my part. And that first conference that we did, we had the great fortune of having Michael Cox, the creator and producer of the Granada series, actually come as the main guest at that very first conference. And that has been a blessing that has paid dividends down the road ever since. And so the first 5, that's a long answer. The first 5 were all sort of general Sherlockian conferences. But by the time the review had kind of run its course, still liked the events, and we decided to take it up a notch and just devote it to film and television, radio.
Now, I noticed that you have not renamed the conference from Doyle to Downey.
No, we haven't.
No, I just assume that's just an error. You just haven't been paying attention to.
Well, we're lazy. See, that would mean changing the template for the program, and
it's a lot of retyping. Yeah. But do you include anywhere in the or when you think about the upcoming conference, are you going to go beyond perhaps Brett to other things? I mean, believe me, I am not arguing for a lot of time spent on Robert.
Yeah, well, no, it's not just about Brett. I mean, it's in the title. It's catchy, Gillette to Brett, and we've done 5 now, so it's sort of a brand identity now, and that's one thing. There's been so much that's happened since the first conference. We had Gillette to Brett, and we didn't have anything past Brett to speak of. I mean, of note. And then all of a sudden came this explosion in 2010. So, but by then we'd done a few, and the title has a sort of is an asset now. But it's not simply about Brett or Gillette. I mean, there's a little bit of that in every one of these conferences. But yeah, in this conference and past ones, we've looked at, oh my gosh, everything. We've looked at Gillette on stage. We've talked about Sherlockian radio. We've had presenters, the Rathbone films and the silent films and the Granada television series and Peter Cushing's various incarnations of Holmes, and I mean, on and on. And this time we're touching on a number of the more modern aspects, which we did in the last one too. So there's a little bit of everything in there.
And when is the next Gillette to Brett?
So Gillette to Brett 5 is coming in October, and it's the weekend of October 5 through 7 in 2018. So it'll be coming this fall. And it's in Bloomington, Indiana. The first 2 we held in Indianapolis, but the facilities and the venues that we have available to us in Bloomington, Indiana, on the campus of Indiana University are tremendous. And again, that's another real blessing that we're enjoying for this conference.
Now, along the way, and I know we joked early on, I think it was when we had you on the show the first time about Gillette to Brett 2 Electric Boogaloo. Does each iteration of the show, and you do this, every 3 years? Is that right?
Well, yeah, traditionally we've done them every 3 years, although it took 4 years for this one. We've been busy, and we've gone to this. We've done 5 of these, and you start to think, well, we've had some really tremendous speakers and presenters, and talked about so many of these things. What can we? What's left to say about it?
Well, so Has each
but then you
one
wait
had
around and you wait for that muse to touch you, and then
right.
and it does. And so it just took an extra year to get there. But this lineup this year is top shelf. Worth the wait.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've looked down the list of presenters there. It's impressive. We'll get to them in just a moment. But do you try for a theme on each one, where you try and say, well, this one's going to be all about Gillette on stage. This one's going to be about the Rathbone series. Do you do things like that, or is it more just kind of a conglomeration?
No, we don't do that. We try to, you know, the official subtitle of the conferences is, or a tagline, or however you want to call it, whatever you want to call it, is celebrating Sherlock Holmes on stage, screen, and radio. And so we try to have, to that end, we try to have something in there from all three of those areas in each conference. And it's really can be a challenge sometime when you start to look around. You don't want to repeat yourself.
Right.
And so far we haven't. And it's been, but you know, the beauty of that is it opens up your playbook in a way, you know, it kind of gives you a broader field to look for your topics and your speakers and your subject matter.
Well, and it's got to be so challenging as a conference organizer. I mean, the challenge that you've got is you want to balance certainly what's interesting for the audience, you know, what's going to attract people. You need to look at the balance of speakers that you have, and that means, you know, their areas of expertise, and certainly more so in recent years than later, balancing gender representation on the podium, and then of course you need to kind of get the topics from them that are appropriate to fill all those gaps. So you're juggling an awful lot at the same time. That can't be easy.
Well, you are exactly right about the challenges, and there's even more than that. That's a very good summation. But you know, let's say you find all that, you meet all that criteria, which can be formidable. But you also have to get your venue lined up. You've got to find, and for instance, we've been holding them now at Indiana University, and we can get into why we do that, but we're using 3 venues on that campus. Actually 4 venues. We're using the hotel, which is in the Indiana Memorial Union, this tremendous Gothic giant facility that has hotels and meeting space and an auditorium and restaurants and everything in it. So you got to get a weekend where the hotel is available, plus the auditorium in the Union that we use during the daytime, plus the Lilly Library, which we also are partners on this, and plus the IU Cinema, which is also another venue. So you've got to kind of find the magic lineup that you just outlined: topics, speakers, mix of age, gender, specialties, and then you've got to get all that to line up on the magic date that fits the venue. And it's a challenge sometimes. It can be a real challenge.
No doubt.
And so from the time that Mark and I sort of say, you know, I think it's time to take the plunge again, to the time it actually happens is months, and I mean, like 9 months at least, maybe even a year. We start to work on it to get all that in place before we can even announce that we're doing it. You know, it's a challenge. This is why we only do it every 3 or 4 years now, because it takes that long to recover from all that.
Well, we're going to let you recover from the first half of this interview while we go to our sponsor. The spring 2018 issue of the Baker Street Journal has arrived in our inbox. As always, it's a fascinating amalgam of content from the minds of Sherlockians worldwide. Do you remember hearing Ross Davies tell us about the Princess Mary boxes for soldiers in episode 137? Well, here in the spring 2018 BSJ, you can read the paper that he delivered at the BSI dinner in January. He gets into the topic in great detail, and it's illustrated with plenty of examples of such boxes. We also get a glimpse of female villains in the canon by Lise Sherwood Fabre, 20 in total. Can you name them all? Monica Schmidt makes the case for bipolar disorder in Sherlock Holmes, and she should know. She's a licensed mental health counselor. There's much more. We won't spoil it for you, but now is the time to make it a point to subscribe. 5 issues a year, including the Christmas annual, all for just $41.95 in the U.S. Head on over to bakerstreetjournal.com and subscribe for yourself or a friend today. And now, back to our program. Tell us a little bit about what you've got lined up and who you've got lined up on the program this year.
Yeah, I would be happy to. So this year, every year we've been very fortunate to have at least one industry professional who has produced something, had a hand in producing, directing, writing, a major Sherlockian dramatic interpretation piece. We have had in the past, we've had Nicholas Meyer, and who needs no introduction. I think he's been on the podcast here. We all know who he is.
He has, yeah.
We've had Jeremy Paul, who was the primary award-winning screenwriter for the Granada television series. We had Edward Hardwick at the first Gillette to Bread. We've had oh gosh, I start to forget. We've had Michael Hoey, the son of Dennis Hoey, who played Lestrade in the Basil Rathbone, Nigel Bruce film series, and Michael was a Hollywood professional himself, producer and director of film and television. We've had, oh my gosh, anyway, so that gives you an example of who we've had, and this year we're really excited because we have Jeffrey Hatcher, who was the screenwriter for the film for the film Mr. Holmes, starring Ian McKellen as Sherlock Holmes, the adaptation of A Slight Trick of the Mind. It's a wonderful movie, and of all the modern incarnations that we've had since 2010, in my opinion, it's probably the most, in spirit anyway, faithful to the actual character of Sherlock Holmes. And it's a beautiful motion picture. And he's here, but he's also a Sherlockian playwright. He's written 2 plays, one of which will be presented at a matinee on Sunday afternoon of the conference. And we're going to have it's tied into the conference. And so not only will he be there presenting as a speaker on Saturday, he will be speaking about his play before it's put on Sunday afternoon as well. So we're very excited about having him there.
Will that be a full production?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. At the Indiana Repertory Theater in downtown Indianapolis, the largest, oldest professional live theater in the state. And it's a wonderful venue, professional cast, and it's going to be magnificent.
Oh,
and let's see. Oh, we have Les Klinger, who is also familiar to many of your listeners, I'm sure.
We've heard of him.
Of course, Les, yeah. Les is, of course, the author of the Sherlock Holmes Reference Library, published by Wessex Press, but also the new annotated Sherlock Holmes and the new annotated everything, it seems like. But the other thing about Les is that he has been technical advisor to a number of the modern Sherlockian productions that have occurred since 2010. And so Les is going to talk to us about some of his experiences in that realm, in the motion picture and television realm of his Sherlockian career. We have we're going to have Ashley Polisak, who holds I believe the only PhD in Sherlockian film and television I think her specialty really is in adaptations. And she is the co-editor of the BSI book, Behind the Canonical Screen. And Ashley's going to be speaking. Let me see. We have, we have David Stewart Davies, who, he's actually the only speaker who will have appeared at every From Gillette to Brett conference since 2003.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. David is, if you've ever seen David speak live or present live, you know what a treat that is. So that's very exciting.
Yeah.
Another presenter we have is, author Terrence Faraday. He's a member of the BSI, but he's a award-winning author, mystery series, Owen Keene mystery series, but he's also an expert on the film career and life of Basil Rathbone. And he's going to be speaking about Basil Rathbone's about the Sherlock Holmes radio series starring Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce, and brought to you by Petri Wine. And we have an author named Lynette Porter. She's written a number of Sherlockian books, including Sherlock Holmes for the 21st Century. I believe she's going to be primarily speaking about Elementary and how they do the character arcs and the transformative nature of that character as presented in that show. I think Ashley's going to be covering the BBC Sherlock series. And then Nick Utekin from England is coming. Nick is going to be, Nick is the author of our forthcoming title called The Complete Pageant Portfolio, which reproduces every pageant illustration, and where we have the original, I think we have every original pageant illustration reproduced along with its published version in this book. And Nick is going to be speaking on pageant's influence on the portrayal of Sherlock Holmes on stage and screen.
Very nice.
Yeah, it's going to be wonderful. It really is.
Well, Bert, that sounds like we should go.
I'm available. I'm available. And our listeners can go too, because if you go right now to wessexpress.com, you will see registration is open, and the venue looks really interesting at the university. It sounds like everything is right in sort of the right area, that once you arrive, it's pretty easy to get from place to place. And as you point out, you've got the theater for Jeff Hatcher's play and the other facilities for screenings. And these screenings are not broadcast DVDs. I see in the program you've actually managed to find 35 millimeter film. I remember that. My father used to tell me about that.
Oh, yes, we are. The IU Cinema is one of the venues that I mentioned earlier, and it's a state-of-the-art movie theater. It is it can show everything from 16 millimeter up to 4K theatrical digital projection, 8K too, I think, if I'm remembering that correctly. It is state-of-the-art, and of course, their main love is film in the true sense of the word, film. And we have, they have connections all across the country. They are recognized in that world as a real, honest to goodness, state of the art film theater and movie palace. And they have accessed prints that we're showing from like the UCLA archives, which, if you're familiar with them, are outside of the Library of Congress, the number one depository of motion picture and television media. Not only do they archive them, but they also actively restore them. So what we're going to be showing this weekend is going to be probably better than most people have seen in their personal experience.
Yeah, it sounds to me like I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere needs to be there.
I think we do.
Well, that would be lovely. I would love to see you guys there.
Yeah, and for our listeners, what a great chance not only to attend this amazing program, see some amazing speakers, obviously see some amazing presentations, films, etc. But you also get to meet us. I mean, what could be better?
It's a win-win.
Right, right. Now, have you covered Sherlockian podcasting in the show yet, in the conference?
I don't believe we have. I think we need to break the ice there, Scott. You need to come.
Now,
maybe we could combine that with Sherlockian cocktails.
Oh, that
well,
could
believe me, there's plenty of Sherlockian cocktails there as well. It's not a that's it's Sherlockians.
I may have to bring a Sherlockian cocktail shaker. What do you know? Now, Steve, one of the things that I know you take great personal pride in is sharing a little bit of your own collection with regard, or as it relates to the Sherlockian world of film and television. You want to give people a little bit of a tease as to what they might see on display?
Well, sure. I would love to. As I mentioned, I'm a huge fan of Sherlockian cinema and television, and a collector, and collect in a lot of areas. But one of the areas that it's just started to come to me. It's kind of odd, and collectors know what that means. You start to look for something, and then the material just starts to come. I have a rather, at least in my experience, a rather large collection of Sherlockian cinema artifacts. I have lots of autographed material. Much of it's framed on the wall of my library, and I'll bring some of that for people to see because it's kind of cool. And but I also have a costume collection that I think is pretty interesting and kind of fun. I have looking around the room here that I'm in. I have probably the one that gets the most attention is a frock coat that was Jeremy Brett's in the first season of the Granada television series. If you look on the inside lapel, inside pocket, you can see the costumer's stamp in there that says J. Brett, May 1983, I think, or 82, whatever the date was on there, right on the pocket. And I had this on display last time, and since then I've come to believe that this was also the frock coat that he wore as Freddie Eynsford Hill in My Fair Lady when he's saying "On the Street Where You Live." I haven't definitively proved it, but it's a perfect screen match for that frock coat as well. And I'm working on trying to verify that before I make the definitive claim. But I know these costumers, they keep costumes records on everybody. And when he was in My Fair Lady in the mid to late 60s, and then he comes back 12 years later to do Sherlock Holmes, they just pulled his costumes and relabeled it and sent it over. So I think that's what it is, but it's pretty cool. I've got a costume of clothing worn by Richard Green in the Hound of the Baskervilles. He played Henry Baskerville, and he never wore. I have a mannequin with the shirt and a vest or a waistcoat and a pair of pants. He never wore all three of these together, but they are all together on the mannequin. So they were all his from the film. I've got a full Sherlock Holmes costume from the Deerstalker right down to the Inverness Cape, right down to to a pair of spats that were worn by, of all people, Captain Kangaroo in a recurring character on his television show for kids back in the 60s, late 50s maybe even. The character was the detective, and it was a recurring character that he played. I've got a vest that was worn by Nigel Bruce, and I believe it was worn in The Hound of the Baskervilles. I've got Ben Kingsley's suit coat from Without a Clue, which is one of the films that we'll be showing at the IU Cinema. You can see it in person. So there's just lots of things. I've got a lot of other items, big and small. I'm not even remembering them all at the moment, but we'll have them all on display out there for people to see, because I think people get a kick out of seeing some of that stuff. I know I do, so I'm pretty typical. So I like to share it. I know people like to see it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I've also got the only known ticket that is still in existence to the Rathbone and Bruce radio show. which is I think kind of cool.
Yeah, that's great. So, Steve, thinking back over the course of the last decade and a half as you've put on these shows, and I know you've mentioned a number of luminaries as you reminisced about some of the folks you were able to attract. What is the moment or the thing that you are the most proud of over the course of putting these series of conferences together?
Oh, well, that's easy. It's not a person or, I'm proud of the people we've had. And there have been some real standouts. I remember when Mark Gagan and I, at the very first one, were at the airport waiting to do, to greet Edward Hardwicke upon his arrival from France. And I remember we're standing there saying, well, gosh, how are we going to know? Are we going to recognize him? What's he look like if he's not Dr. All of a sudden, there he was, walking down the concourse, which was a total freak out moment. And then there's another really fond memory, there's so many, is at the third conference, first one in Bloomington, we were screening a 35th anniversary screening of the 7% Solution. And Nick Meyer was there. And he hadn't seen the movie himself in probably 20 years and was kind of down on it. He had a lot of, all he could think of was all the things that he would do differently now that he'd had more experience as a screenwriter and a director. But I remember we had a seat. He and Mark and I had a seat at the back of the theater, and the audience was down in front of us, and we rolled the film. And I just remember his body language, and I remember he was sort of buttoned up, kind of apprehensive about it. But as the movie played, and of course it's as sympathetic an audience as you can get, full house, he just sort of unfolded because he realized not only was the audience loving it, but he realized, as he went on to say later on, he'll tell you this himself, he realized that, wow, this is a pretty good film after all. And to be there and kind of sort of having facilitated that experience for everybody and him is a moment that I'm very proud of. But my favorite thing about the conference, quite honestly, is watching and experiencing everybody else who comes having such a good time, because it is such a good time. And I say this every time. Your party is only as good as the guests that you have attended. And every one of these things ends up being a little different than the previous one. But it's always sort of the sum total of all the people that come there. And there's an energy and an excitement about it. And it's just magical. I mean, it truly is. And to have been able to facilitate that whole experience for people is, that's really my favorite thing about the whole thing. It really is.
Well, that's perfect. That is absolutely perfect. Well, if you are interested in finding out more about From Gillette to Brett 5, get on over to wessexpress.com. We tell you to go there on every episode. Well, now you have another reason to go there. You'll see a big banner across the top that says register for From Gillette to Brett 5. Check out all the things going on there, the presenters, schedule of events, lodging, registration, etc. It is all there. We would love to see you. Steve and Mark would love to see you. And I'm sure you will find wonderful memories being made this October in Bloomington, Indiana. Steve, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I love being on your podcast. I listen to it all the time, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity to talk about the conference. I want everybody to come. It's wonderful. It's a great thing, and I hope as many of you can make it as possible.
it sounds like fun. Over the years, I have never been. I have an unbroken track record of missing every Gillette to Brett. And I think I will definitely break that track record this year. I'd really like to be there. And the speakers are great. You know, Jeff Hatcher. I can talk to Jeff all day long, and Nick Utekin and Les Klinger. That sounds really good. And I'd like to see the play. Yeah, that alone sounds like it's going to be worth attending. That's kind of a bonus feature there. Certainly you'll have the screening on it looks like Friday night, and wonderful full day of activities on Saturday. So we'll have to check out the technology situation there. Maybe we could stream something, do something live, do a special episode or something. Well, we'll work it out. We'll investigate that and get back to you folks and see how that works. And now, back once again for a repeat appearance. I know that's all too infrequent, but we are absolutely joyed when they can make the commitment. It's one of our favorite sponsors.
Friends, we know you want to bring new technologies to the world of Sherlock Holmes, and now you can with your new online home for trading fractional shares of Sherlockian rarities from Sherlock Holmes brand products. Yes, we use blockchain, the secure technology that tracks digital currency, to make it possible for you to own 3% of a mint copy of Beaton's Christmas Annual, 1/50th of the manuscript for The Hound of the Baskervilles, Chapter 3, 100% of the right sleeve button of Basil Rathbone's Inverness Cape, and you can trade them all with other Sherlockians for fun and fabulous profits. It's the only decentralized transaction registry that delivers the 3 C's. Completely canonical commerce. Friends, the answer to whose was it is now 625-373-472-972.88437129.5. And that could be you once you sign up at blockchainofreasoning.io today.
I have to tell you, I wondered what IBM was doing with an AI that was named Watson, and now I get it.
Now you know.
It makes complete sense.
Now you know. Blockchainofreasoning.io.
Yes. Way to go. Well, it's time to go from blockchains to blockheads. Get your heads blocked around this. It's quiz time, folks. This is the time when we bring you the episodic canonical couplets. Yes, we give you a couplet that is supposed to represent one of the 60 canonical stories. And when you decode this, when you determine what story that is, you are supposed to email us at comment@ihearofsherlock.com with the subject canonical couplets in the title. Now, the last winner that we had the last time around, let's see. Oh, we have to spin the wheel first. Here, let's spin the big prize wheel. Okay, there we have it. Okay, we have our name here. Okay, you remember, of course, what the canonical couplet was that time. As plots go, this is nothing less than gorgeous, involving sliced Napoleons and the Borgias. That, of course, is from, Bert?
Oh, I suppose it's the 6 Napoleons.
That is absolutely right. And of all of the correct entries we got this time, the prize, the big barrel spin there, landed on Mary Miller. Mary, we hope you're okay after having that barrel land on you. Well, we will be sending out a prize to you, Mary, and we know you are a faithful listener. Thank you for your support. So, once again, we will pick the canonical couplet, and again, everyone who wants to enter can, and we will take all the correct entries and put them in that barrel and spin them around and find our randomized winner next time. And The canonical couplet for this episode is: Some strange proceedings occupied the night. The colors were distinctly green and white. If you know the answer to that, tell us what the canonical story is. Subject line is canonical couplet. And email us at comment@ihearofsherlock.com. Good luck.
I like the canonical couplets.
You like that?
Yeah.
Well, it's a limited run engagement. You know, we can only do it for 60 episodes.
Well, you could change it. You know, you can move it to Sherlockian. You can move it to Shakespearean characters and start doing canonical Capulets.
I prefer canonical Montagues.
I knew you would.
Were there any Montagues in the canon?
Well,
yes, Montague Place.
I certainly think so. Yeah.
There is a Montague Street. Montague Street was where Holmes had his rooms.
Right, lodgings.
When he came up to London in the Musgrave Ritual.
But I think there's another Montague, isn't there?
The Montague Place mentioned in the Copper Beeches.
Yep.
That's where Violet Hunter was writing from. So there you go. No Capulets, though.
No.
Well, and we must capitulate that this is, in fact, the time for us to wrap up the show and say, until next time, I am bound to remain Scott Monty.
And I am the unbound Bert Wolder.
The game's afoot.
I'm afraid that in the pleasure of this conversation, I am neglecting business of importance, which awaits me elsewhere.
Thank you for listening. Please be sure to join us again for the next episode of I Hear of Sherlock Everywhere, the first podcast dedicated to Sherlock Holmes.
Goodbye, and good luck, and believe me to be, my dear fellow, very sincerely yours, Sherlock Holmes.